Welcome back. On today's video, I wanted to show you changing out some electrical switches and receptacles. And I chose this one for two reasons. They're doubled, they're ganged together, but this receptacle is split. So it's a separate breaker for the top than it is from the bottom. It's at the kitchen counter, so you can, if you're plugging in toasters and kettles, typically in the newer homes, they'll do this, they'll split them. I say newer, I mean, this house is 30 years old, so they've been doing it for quite a while, but older homes before that, they didn't typically do this. The other thing I'm hoping, when I pull these out, we'll see what style they are in the back, because there's different styles of these, and some of them, people don't know how to get the wires and stuff out of them. So we'll see what they've got here, what style these are. So I start out, because these have been, the switch plate covers have been removed more than once, and they've been painted, and they've painted right over the ends of the plugs. So if you just start taking that plug out and you pull it out, sometimes it'll actually peel your paint. So I like to just cut around them a little bit before I loosen them off, just to cut that paint. I'm going to try and stay out of the way of the video as much as I can so that you can see what I'm doing. Of course, I've already been to the breaker panel and I've made sure I've turned off the breakers for all of this. There's 3 breakers for this. There's one for the light, and then each of these has their own breaker. So I have all 3 of them turned off. Some people are nervous or afraid to get into household wiring to do this sort of thing. You're just changing a receptacle. It's no big deal. Just follow the same, where the wires come off, put them back on your new ones. There is one thing though that you do have to remember to do if you're doing one of these split receptacles. And I will show you that, because it's the same receptacle that you would put anywhere else that's not split. But there is a change you have to make to the receptacle itself, to the new one that you're putting in. It's not a big deal, but it's definitely important. You will cause a short circuit if you don't do it, because there's 2 hot wires on this, one for top, one for bottom, and one common wire that does both. So if you don't make the modification on the plug, you've now got 2 hot wires running to that plug. There, so that just popped right off without peeling any paint. And that one peeled a little bit. I didn't cut around that corner. Hopefully our switch plate cover is going to cover that up. I think it will. This one does not have a lot of extra length on the wire on this one. And it is one of the styles that I was hoping it would be to show you. So we have lots of room on the light switch, so we can move that one over out of our way. Now I don't know, because it's so short, the wire is not around the screw terminals on the side at all. I'll show you on the new one, if I can get on the back side of these. So there's a small round hole here, and you can push the copper end of the wire straight into that round hole. There's a metal tab in here that's slightly angled upward, and it grabs a hold of the wire so the wire doesn't just pull back out. The square hole below the round one is for a small screwdriver. You can put that in and bend that tab down and pop the wires right back out again. That's the style that's in the wall currently. Some of the earlier ones didn't have that square hole to be able to put a screwdriver in there and bend that tab down. So you have 2 choices with those style. Get a hold of the wire with a pair of pliers or something and pry it out and pull it back out. Or if you had enough room like that, you could just cut the wire off, strip some of the coating off, and put it back in your new plug. This one, if it had been that style, I definitely would have been prying it out because there's not enough length on that wire for me to cut it off and restrip it and put another plug in. I'd be literally inside the box trying to work, and that wouldn't work. So we'll turn the screws in on the side of this plug so they're not sticking out on our new one, because I'm not going to use them. I'm going to put the wires right back in those round holes. It's much quicker, much easier. We don't need those screws sticking out at all. Now we'll see if we can get in here. I don't know if we got enough room to even get in here and release those. Okay, so there's one hot wire. There. Second one. So there's our two hot wires for that receptacle. We'll move around to the other side. Let's undo the ground wire. Maybe that'll give us a little bit more length on this one. Nope. There. Okay, so the modification we need to make. So if you notice that receptacle when it came out, the big round holes on the bottom, we're going to put this one in the same way. That should always be on the bottom. If you've got it this way around, you've actually got it upside down. So we're going to put it in this way. Our two hot wires go on this side of the receptacle. The modification that we need to make, if we can get it here, so you've got a brass terminal top and bottom, and they're actually connected right in the middle there between the two of them. We're going to break that tab out of there. So with the needle nose pliers, we just snapped it out. I don't know if we can see now. There's a break right in the center of that between the two, so they are now separated. This side we're going to leave so that it passes from one to the other, because we're only using the one common wire on this side that's going to do both top and bottom. But we have our two separate hot wires for this side. So that's all there is to making that into a split receptacle as far as the receptacle portion goes. The wiring obviously is different because you have that extra hot wire in there. You've got the power off. It doesn't matter what order you put these on. You know, you typically start with the ground wire, then I haven't forgotten it. The common wire, the white one, is doing top and bottom both. Doesn't matter which one of those two holes you choose, the top one or the bottom one. To stick it back in, we're just going to straighten the end of our copper wire out to make it easier. I know you can't see me actually putting it in the plug because I can't get the camera in a position to do that. But so all the wires are back in that exactly as they were in the old one that came out. Get both of your screws started. You don't want to crank one screw in all the way and then try and get the other one lined up. So we'll start them both. Push that back in there so it bends the wires somewhat. And we can tighten them back up. Now don't tighten these 100% just yet. If you're doing a single switcher receptacle, I advise the same thing. Don't tighten it right away completely, but especially if you're doing a double like this, and I'll show you why. When it comes time to put that switch plate cover on. Now these switches, they look the same either way, but if you look really closely on the metal portion of this, one of these will say top. And this one is marked top just underneath that screw. I keep banging into the camera stand. It does say top on that, so that's the way we want that in. Same thing, I'm just putting the screws back around, sorry, not the screws, the wires the new light switch I have, it does have those holes in the back, but instead of straightening out the copper ends on these wires, the more you bend them, the weaker they get. They're already bent to hook around the screw, so we're just going to go ahead and use them. That's all there is to that. Simple light switch, not a three-way. I do have a three-way one that I might try and get added onto this video because it's relatively short. But it's basically the same thing as that receptacle. It has an extra wire in it than what a normal light switch like this. It just has two. A three-way has 3 wires in it. And just take them out, put them back in the same positions that you found them. There's no modifications to make to a light switch if it's on a three-way circuit. It's the switch itself that is different. This switch only had those 2 terminals. There is nowhere to put a 3rd wire. So you need to buy a three-way light switch if that's what you're changing. Typically you'll find them in hallways. You'll have a switch upstairs somewhere in the hallway and one at the bottom of the hallway. Okay, so neither one of those are tight. I can wiggle these both around, and the reason I wanted that is because you can't change the spacing on the switch plate cover. You've only got that space between the two. So you can move these around, and it's actually easy. If you put this on backwards when you're doing this part, it's easier to get a hold of it. Get it over there and wiggle them around. They're all lined up where you want them. Now you can tighten them up. Pay attention that if they move on you or whatever, that you may have to check this a couple of times before you actually get them tight, because sometimes they do want to move. Check our fit. Yeah, it's a little bit snug. I'm not sure. They both look straight. I think we'll move the top of this light switch over just a little bit. We'll try that. I think that'll be good. Okay, now another thing I've noticed on this one, it's a good thing, if I just put that cover plate on right now, there's a gap around the edge of this wall plug. The wall plug itself is sunk in deeper than what the face of this frame is going to be. So I'm actually going to loosen these back off. They're not going to be 100% tight. The light switch was a little bit also, not as much as the plug. Okay, so the idea here is when you screw the switch plate on into the plug, hopefully the screws are going to pull that plug forward to cover up that gap. Yeah, it's working nicely. And when you plug something in and unplug it again, the pull on that receptacle, it's not going to pull the receptacle out, because you do still have those screws screwed the receptacle into the box. So you just wanted to leave them loose enough so that doing this step can pull those switches forward to cover up any of the gaps that you may have had around them. And that's typical. When they're building a house, you got to remember these receptacle boxes are installed before the drywall is. So the electricians run their wires, put their boxes onto the wall studs, and they try and gauge that, okay, we're putting 1/2 inch sheetrock or drywall in this house, so let's leave that box sticking out 1/2 inch so that everything is flush when you assemble it and you get your drywall on. Sometimes you're off by 1/8 inch. So there, everything is hooked back up. Looks good. So we'll turn the breakers back on, we'll check the switches and the plugs, make sure everything's working, and then maybe I will see if I do have a 3-way switch that I need to change. So we can do that on this video. I'll just need to reposition the camera and stuff to where that is. Now this is a three-way switch because there's another one over at the back door. That switch and this switch operate the same light, so it's a three-way switch. So we'll start out the same way. We're just going to cut the paint around the edge of this switch plug so before we try and take it out so it doesn't peel the paint on the wall. And they've just used the screw terminals on this one. They didn't push the wires into the back or anything. So we got 3 wires in this. Normally you would only have 2, usually just your black and your white. This one has the red wire in here also. And it's just when you buy that wire, those are the 3 colors that typically come in it. But that third wire is what makes this a 3-way switch. So there's our new switch, and we went with the same style, just the rectangle shape, so all the switches will look the same in the house when we're done. I'm just turning the ground screw in out of the way on this light switch. There's no ground wire in there to put on the screw. When you screw the screws that hold the plug into the metal box, there's a ground wire in there on the box. So the switch is actually grounded when it's screwed into the box anyhow. And we're doing the same, we're just putting the wires back the same way that they had them on the other switch. This switch is also marked the top so you know which way is right side up on it. And I was once told the only reason to make sure any light switches, whether it's this style or the old style that had the little tab there that you move, to make sure that when you're putting them in, that up like this is the on position, so that when you push it down, that's the off position. And the reason being, if you were ever working on something, you wouldn't want this switch, if it was old and kind of loose, to accidentally turn on and fall into that downward position and turn power on to something at the other end that you might be working on or don't want power on at that particular moment. And that was the whole reason for having a right side up on them. Just like we did with the other one, we're not going to tighten it right up yet. We're going to get our switch plate cover and make sure we've got everything in where we want it so it'll cover it all. So everything looks like it's going to be straight there. The switch plate cover will cover everything up around the switch so we can tighten it up in that position. And then we will see for the depth of it whether or not we need to loosen them off so that it can pull forward to cover any possible gaps around the switch plate cover. But that one looks good the way it is, so we're just going to leave it like that. So that's all there is to changing out a three-way light switch when there's already one there and you're just changing it to update it for looks or because the old ones wore out. Okay, now we've got a dimmer switch that we also want to change. So this is the old style push on and off, and then you rotate the knob to dim your lights or increase your light. So we're going to update it to a new rectangle style one to match all the other lights and receptacles we're changing. So it has a slide bar for the dimming switch, and you can just turn the light on or off. This switch is actually designed, it can be used as a single pole switch, which is what we have, or this could also be used as a three-way switch. So you could have the light hooked up to this and turn it off from another, on and off from another location, as well as this location. This location would be the only one that has the dimming option, but it could still be turned on and off from somewhere else. So this can be used either way, as a single switch or as a three-way switch. Those round knobs just pull straight off. We'll have to see if we have enough wiring here to do this. So this original switch came with wires already on it, and they've just used morettes to twist them together with the wiring that's in here for the house. So hopefully it's long enough, because the new switch doesn't come with any wire on it already. And this one's marked which way is the top also on this new switch. They've covered up the third terminal on this side with this sticker here, and that's the one you would remove that sticker and use it if you were wiring it as a three-way switch. This particular switch can be used for LED lights, halogen lights, and I'm hoping it can still be used for incandescent lights, because that's what the light fixture is that's on the other end of this. Okay, now before I put the switch plate cover on, I'm going to go turn the breaker back on and try this switch and see if it works. Yep, seems to work very good there. Excuse me, I didn't want to completely finish that yet, because this switch also has a dial right here on the side, and it's a timer. So when you first turn the switch on, if it takes a long time for the light to actually come on and start brightening up, you can increase that time delay on how quickly the light comes on when you hit the switch. But it seems to be working fine just where it is. So we're going to call that done. We're going to put the switch plate cover on. Good. So that's the end of our electrical video. So we've covered different types of plugs and switches and some information on them that hopefully you found useful. Thank you for watching.